The last thing Agent Shimoda transmitted was a hand, not his face, not coordinates. A hand, someone else's, caught at the edge of the frame in the dying seconds of his surveillance feed, wearing a sigil on its wrist the size of a coin. A pale bioluminescent mark that pulsed once, twice, and then the feed died and Shimoda died with it. And the Interstellar Peacekeeping Division had nothing but a single corrupted frame and a body that the Veth Dominion's Hong Kong consulate claimed had never existed. Kenji Katami had watched that frame 400 times on the flight from Geneva. He watched it a 500 as the shuttle dropped through cloud cover over the Japanese coast, the seat beside him occupied by a man named John Reyes, who had been described in the briefing packet as a senior field consultant from the Western Division, and who had spent most of the flight asleep with his boots on the bulkhead and his mouth open. Reyes was American in the way that certain geological formations are American. Broad, unhurried, seemingly unconcerned with forces that should, by any reasonable estimate, concern him greatly. "You've been staring at that thing for 6 hours," Reyes said without opening his eyes. "I've been analyzing it. What's the difference?" Katami did not answer. He closed the feed and looked out the window at the lights of Osaka spreading below them like spilled circuitry. Somewhere in those lights, a diplomatic convoy was already moving. The Prime Minister of Budabal, a World 3 transit gates from this one, a civilization that had survived 2 Veth incursions through careful neutrality and careful silence, was scheduled to land. 40 hours for a state visit that had taken 14 months to negotiate. The Veth Dominion wanted that visit to end in a body bag. They had contracted ZZZ to make sure it did. ZZ was not an acronym. It was a designation, untranslatable, given to a distributed network of assassins that operated across 9 inhabited systems. They had no ideology. They had a price structure. And they had, according to intelligence files that Katami had memorized on the flight, already deployed 2 operatives into Japanese territory, a man called Hayata, who had once served in the IPD's division, and who had gone dark after the Siri Station incident, and a woman known only as Ayako, whose file photograph showed someone with the relaxed, interested expression of a person who genuinely enjoyed her work. Katami thought about Hayata for a long time. He had served with Hayata during the Second Veth border conflict. 3 weeks in a collapsed relay station on the outskirts of the Kuiper perimeter, eating ration packs and taking shifts at the one functioning sensor terminal. Hayata had been methodical and quiet, and very good at chess, and had once, in the 38th hour of a siege that they were not sure they would survive, laughed at something Katami said with a fullness that suggested he was genuinely delighted to be alive. That version of Hayata was dead. Some version that wore his face had taken a contract to kill a foreign head of state on Japanese soil. Katami put it away. Reyes was awake now, sitting up, running a hand through hair that didn't much benefit from the attention. He pulled a flask from his jacket, offered it across the aisle without looking. "I don't drink on assignment," Katami said. "Neither do I, technically." Reyes took a drink, recapped it. "Sigil, a rank marker, Veth military aristocracy. Someone in Budabal's delegation is Veth-aligned, which means ZZZ isn't working for a faction within the Prime Minister's own government. Or they are, and that faction has Veth backing." Reyes. Quiet for a moment. Outside the window, a transport aircraft crossed their flight path, its running lights winking red in the dark. "You know who the sigil belongs to?" "Not yet, but you have a short list." Katami looked at him. "General Lubasa, or a man called the Fez. We don't have a name, only a description." "Both are traveling with the Prime Minister." "Both will be within arm's reach of him for the duration of the visit." Reyes absorbed this with the particular stillness of someone recalibrating rather than being surprised. Then he stood, stretched, cracked something in his back that sounded structurally concerning, and picked up his bag. "Okay," he said. "Let's go to work." The IPD safe house in Osaka was a 4th-floor apartment above a noodle shop, and it smelled of both. Someone had left a thermos of cold green tea on the table, and a package of materials that Katami went through methodically, while Reyes investigated the kitchen cupboards with the focused energy of a man who had not eaten since Geneva. The materials confirmed what they knew and added 2 things they didn't. First, the weapon. He had sourced something from the Veth Dominion's biological division that the file referred to as a Class 7 dissolution agent, but which someone in the Geneva lab had nicknamed, with the grim humor of people who work too close to the things they study, the killing bottle. It was delivered as a gas. It dissolved the neural sheathing of organic tissue, Veth and human both, within approximately 4 minutes of concentrated exposure. It had been disguised in at least one previous deployment as the pressurized canister inside a standard diplomatic gift package. It looked, the file noted, exactly like a high-end sake bottle. Moda had died of it in Hong Kong. Second, the mystery woman. 3 of ZZZ's surveillance photographs, taken without the photographer's knowledge, which meant Shimoda had been running a counter-surveillance operation in his last hours, showed the same woman 3 separate locations across Hong Kong and Tokyo. She was not in any ZZZ file. She was not in any IPD file. She appeared in each photograph to be watching ZZZ rather than working with them. Tammy studied her face for a long time. Bodyguard? Reyes suggested, eating something he'd found in the cupboard that Katami couldn't identify. Too careful. A bodyguard moves with the principal. He moves alone. Double agent? Or a third party with her own interest in the Prime Minister's survival. Reyes considered. Could be worse. They drove to Lake Ashi the next morning. The Prime Minister's party had taken over a resort on the eastern shore, a decision that had made IPD's logistics team furious and that Katami privately understood because the lake was beautiful. And whoever had survived what Buddha Ball's leadership had survived in the last decade deserved a mourning. Looking at something that was not a threat assessment. He stood on the shoreline while Reyes swept the resort perimeter with a scanner disguised as a tourist's binoculars, and he looked at the water and the mountain reflected in it, and he found himself, without quite deciding to, humming something under his breath. A song his mother had sung, something about rain and perseverance. He couldn't have said why it came to him then. The scanner chirped. It's a heat sig at the boathouse, Reyes said quietly behind him. 2 bodies. Neither of them is big enough to be a ZZ operator. They moved fast and quiet along the shore path. The boathouse door opened without resistance, which was the first wrong thing. Inside, crouched behind a stack of maintenance equipment, was the woman from the photographs. She had a compact scanner of her own. Better than theirs, Kitami noted. And she was pointing it at the resort building across the water with the focused attention of someone listening to a conversation through a closed door. She didn't reach for a weapon. That was the second thing. Kitami, she said in Japanese. Not a question. Held. You have 30 seconds to explain yourself before my partner decides whether to be polite about this. She looked at Reyes. He doesn't look very polite. 25 seconds. She set the scanner down on the floor between them, which was a calculated gesture. Visible, unhurried, not submissive, and straightened. My name is X2. I work for the Prime Minister's Intelligence Service. I've been running an independent operation tracking ZZ's movements since they were contracted. I didn't contact IPD because the contract's by someone within Budabal's own military. Lubasa, Katami said. Something moved across her face. The Fez. Lubasa is. She stopped. Lubasa is trying to stop the assassination. He's been trying to reach your division for 3 weeks. His communications are being intercepted. The lake outside was very still. Somewhere in the resort across the water, a head of state was eating breakfast and did not know that his own intelligence services were operating 2 separate covert operations on his behalf, and that one of his traveling companions was feeding his location data to a murder network. Katami looked at Reyes. Reyes looked at the scanner X2 had set on the floor. That Veth manufacture, salvage, she said. Stripped it from a ZZZ operative in Macau. Any good? Good enough to read the sigil on the Fez's wrist from 200 meters. Reyes looked at Katami. I like her. The Fez's name was Osman. Feared. He met them in a parking structure near the resort at 14, wearing civilian clothes that fit him badly because he was a man built for uniforms, and he moved with the careful deliberateness of someone who knew he was probably being watched and was performing normalcy for an invisible audience. He had a diplomat's briefcase that he did not open and which Katami's scanner identified as containing, among other things, a complete copy of ZZZ's operational file for this mission. The weapon is already in country, Osman said. He spoke quietly without looking directly at any of them. 3 canisters. They arrived as part of the diplomatic gift shipment. Standard inspection missed them because the outer packaging is identical to a legitimate Budabalese export. The killing bottle is inside. Where are the canisters now? Katami asked. Hayata has them. Osman finally looked at him. You know him. I did. Then you know how he operates. He will not use the weapon until the moment is optimal. He will wait. He will be patient. Very patient, Katami knew. 3 weeks in a collapsed relay station. Hayata, playing chess against himself in the dark, moving pieces with the methodical calm of someone who genuinely believed that any problem, given enough time and attention, resolved itself into clarity. The final day of the state visit, Katami said. The Prime Minister is scheduled for the cultural complex in Nara, Osman said, the Dominion's pleasure installation. It was included in the itinerary as a gesture of normalized relations. They all looked at the word, what it meant. A civilization that had twice been invaded agreeing to tour a structure built by its invaders as a demonstration of goodwill, because that was the work that diplomacy was, the long work, the exhausting work, the work that people like Hayata were paid to interrupt. 3,000 civilians in that complex on any given day, Reyes said. 42 members of the Prime Minister's party including security detail, X2 said. And Hayata will have positioned the canisters to maximize atmospheric dispersal. Katami thought of the 4-minute dissolution window of Shimoda's body. 8. We have until tomorrow morning. They found Ayako that night, which was luck, or something that looked like luck from outside, and was actually X2's careful positioning of herself at a nightclub in the Osaka Entertainment District that ZZ's operational file listed as a known preference for female operatives of her profile. The Ayako was performing under the name Adam Rosa, wearing a costume that suggested she found the whole enterprise of assassination as cover rather too easy, and she made them almost immediately and was that. Halfway through a service exit before Reyes caught up to her, Kitami did not think he had much information they could use. He was wrong. Ayako, it turned out, had reconsidered certain career choices over the last 72 hours, triggered by something she declined to specify but that Kitami suspected was the discovery that the killing bottle's dispersal radius made the NAR assignment lethal to anyone in the complex, including ZZZ's own operatives, including her, unless they had the antidote compound that Hayata had and had not shared. Professional relationships in the assassination business apparently had limits. She told them exactly where Hayata would position the canisters. She told them the dispersal sequence. He told them, with a precision that suggested she had been thinking about it for some time, the 4-minute window and how to close it. The Dominion Pleasure Complex in Nara was everything that phrase implied. Vast and glittering and slightly wrong in the way that all Veth architecture was slightly wrong, built for aesthetics. That were adjacent to human but not quite. Angles that didn't resolve properly at close range and colors that seemed different depending on the direction you approached them from. Humans had been visiting it for 11 years. Nobody had ever found it comfortable. Everyone agreed it was impressive, which was, Kitami suspected, the point. They moved through it in the 4 hours before the Prime Minister's party arrived, and it was strange work, checking ventilation nodes and maintenance corridors in a building designed by minds that thought about space differently, where a room that looked like a dead end from one angle opened onto a maintenance shaft from another, where the lighting shifted in ways that made depth perception unreliable. Reyes was better at it than he should have been. TP moved through the wrongness without the slight hesitation that Kitami felt in his own body, the mammalian brain's quiet alarm at geometry that didn't add up, and when Kitami mentioned it, Reyes shrugged. I grew up in a house that settled badly, he said. Nothing ever sat level, you stop noticing. Kitami thought about that, the adaptability of it. Human talent for habituating to environments that should be hostile and finding, after enough time, that they felt normal. They found the first canister at 0842, in a ventilation junction above the main hall. Second was behind a service panel in the east corridor, disguised exactly as Ayako had said. A sake bottle high-end wrapped in decorative foil sitting in a cooling unit with 2 others that, were exactly what they appeared to be. The third took longer. It was Hayata who had the third one. He was waiting in a maintenance level 2 floors below the main complex, in a space that felt like the inside of something's ribcage, support columns rising in organic curves overhead. He looked standing there with the canister in his hand like the version of himself that Kitami had served with. Same stillness, same economy of movement, same face. The eyes were the same too, which was the worst part, because there was recognition in them, and something that sat alongside recognition without being guilt. Kitami, he said. Put it down, Ken. You got the other 2. Hayata considered this with the same quality of attention he'd once given to chessboards in the dark. The canister was in his right hand. Left was open and relaxed at his side. He said. Not a question. He made a calculation she usually does. Something shifted in his expression, not quite amusement, not quite its opposite. So did I. I calculated that you'd come early and I'd have time to argue with you before the party arrived. Argue about what? About whether I'm wrong. He looked at the canister. The Prime Minister's policy ends Budabal's isolationism. Opens 3 transit gates that have been closed since the first incursion. The Veth Dominion gets access to 9 new systems. I know what the policy does. Then you know that the people who hired ZZ aren't wrong about what it means. They're wrong about this, Kitami said. About using this silence. The support columns curved overhead, somewhere far above them, 3,000 people were moving through a building that had been designed to impress them with a power they couldn't quite articulate. And in 40 minutes a head of state, would walk through those same doors to demonstrate that 2 civilizations could find a way to exist in proximity without destroying each other, which was perhaps not wisdom, but was at minimum the kind stubbornness that looked, from a distance, like hope. Hayata set the canister on the floor. He stepped back from it. Kitami didn't move because he was listening for whether there was anything else to hear, and there wasn't. Just Hayata standing in a space shaped like the inside of an alien building, hands open, the old chess player's patience turned toward some calculation that he'd already completed. I'm not surrendering, Hayata said. I want to be clear about that. I understand. I'm making a different calculation. Reyes came through the service hatch behind him then, smooth and unhurried, and Hayata glanced at him once with the expression of a man who had expected exactly this and filed it under confirmed rather than surprised. "You have family here?" Reyes asked. It was the question Katami hadn't asked. Hayata was quiet for a moment. "A daughter in Kyoto, she's 7. He looked at the canister on the floor. The dispersal radius from this level would reach the southern district. Reyes nodded slowly. "Okay, that was all. Not absolution, not condemnation. Okay." The particular human sound of acknowledging a fact that couldn't be changed and moving forward from it anyway. They walked out into the Nara morning with Hayata between them. Not in restraints, because that conversation had been brief and consisted primarily of Hayata pointing out that restraints were, felt, unnecessary and Katami deciding he was probably right. And X2 met them at the perimeter with Osman and a vehicle, and the kind of expression that suggested she had been running several alternative contingency plans, and was relieved to be able to discard them. The Prime Minister arrived at 10, the state visit proceeded. Kitami stood at a perimeter checkpoint for 4 hours and watched the complex's wrong-angled architecture catching the light, and he thought about the Veth Dominion building something designed to impress and humans showing up and finding it just slightly uncomfortable. The body's honest verdict on space is not built for it, and visiting anyway, because that was also a thing humans did. Walk into rooms that didn't fit them and stand in them long enough to find out what the room was actually for. Osman found him at the end of the afternoon, when the last shuttle of the Prime Minister's party had lifted off and the complex was emptying into the autumn dusk. He was still wearing civilian clothes that fit him badly. He handed Katami a sealed case containing the 3 killing bottles, all inert, and a data chip that he said contained the complete intelligence file on the Veth military sigil, enough to identify the network of Dominion-aligned assets embedded in 4 other planetary governments. "General Lubasa sends his thanks," Osman said. "Tell him to contact IPD through official channels next time." "I'll tell him, he won't." Osman looked out at the complex. The light was doing something to its angles that made it look, briefly, almost like something built for human eyes. "It's strange, isn't it? They built this to demonstrate superiority. Humans come, feel vaguely uneasy, and leave thinking about lunch." Katami thought about his mother's song, about Hayata putting a canister on the floor, about Reyes sleeping with his boots on the bulkhead unbothered by the altitude. "We're difficult to impress," he said. "Other." He picked up the case and walked to the vehicle where Reyes was waiting, engine running, looking at something on his phone with an expression of mild interest that probably meant he'd found somewhere. Good for dinner. The Dominion's pleasure complex caught the last of the light behind them, angles resolving and dissolving as the distance grew, and then the road curved and it was gone, and the night came and eased over the Nara hills, and the stars above them were full of worlds that had not yet decided what to make of the species that hummed old songs to itself while scanning for threats, and walked into wrong-shaped rooms and set weapons down on floors and asked after daughters in Kyoto, and kept going anyway and kept going.